Okay, I just got impatient. Let's go. Hey, Leslie, how are you? All right, we are live. Welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. Live, our first show of the year. I'm hearing an echo. Who's hearing an echo?
I don't know. I'm not hearing an echo.
Nick, are you hearing an echo when I talk?
Yeah, I'm getting a bit of an echo.
Uh-oh. Maybe it was me. I don't know. Was it because I muted?
There's still an echo?
No. Or no, on my end. I'm guessing it's me because I'm the one not hearing it.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. We get all our issues out of the way to start the year. Okay, let's go.
Cool. All right. So wait, is there still echo?
Yeah, we're live.
Yeah, I know we're live, but are we still having the audio drama?
Nope.
That you're seeing live. Oh, great. Okay, cool. Well, hi everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to the very first episode of the year. Really exciting. Yeah, I think Robert just introduced himself. So I'm your other host, Leslie Richardson. And today we're talking about some Uno updates, specifically one big update. And so we're joined by Nick Randolph from the Uno team, who's going to be sharing some cool stuff in the Uno space. How are you doing, Nick?
Hey, good. Exciting to show you some awesome stuff.
Cool.
So yeah, I think it's been just over a year since we did an update with you guys. I think I was on with Robert probably about this time last year, I think.
Yeah.
Time flies.
So we're a little overdue. So what's new in the Uno world?
Or I think we should start just so we're all on the same page. What's Uno, first and foremost? If you're new to the show, welcome.
Yeah, for sure. So most people have heard of Maui, right? As a cross-platform technology that comes on the Microsoft stack. Uno is also a cross-platform technology that's again built on the Microsoft stack, with the goal of taking essentially XAML that is the same XAML that is used for WinApp SDK, formerly UWP, and having it work across all of the different platforms. Basically, anywhere the .NET runs, you can run an Uno platform app. So, iOS, Android, Windows, of course, but also, Linux, IoT devices, and of course the web. So it makes it a perfect choice for people who really want a sort of a one single code base that's going to run everywhere. And so the idea and one of the things behind the open source platform is the ability to not only support every target platform, but also to support developers where they're going to be building their apps. So if they're running on a Mac and they're using VS Code, we've got an extension. If they're on Linux and they're using VS Code, we've got support there. But we've also got Rider and of course what we're here to talk about today, Visual Studio. And that's definitely the premium experience. It's definitely the one that gets the most usage. So yeah.
Great. So now that we're all on the same page, what's new and Uno?
Yeah, so look, it's been a big year for us. We've literally just I can actually do the announcement right now. Is we've just launched 5.6. So literally they hit the publish button. You get like an hour ago. The blog post will go out shortly, and this is one of those sort of incremental updates that that it doesn't have a bunch of new features, but it does have a bunch of performance updates. And so one of the things that we're clearly spending a lot of time is trying to get better performance across the board, in terms of rendering, in terms of app launch and those types of things. There are some improvements in terms of app packaging. So that's the ability to make it really easy for developers to be able to package their apps and have them run or deploy to the various stores, code signing, those types of things. And one of the big sort of exciting things that got launched or announced last year was Uno Platform Studio. And so this is sort of a paid subscription-based offering. And the idea there is to build on top of the open source platform and provide tooling for developers that will really accelerate their app development. So there's a couple of different toolings that's part of that, and I'd be keen to walk you through those, and we'll jump into a couple of demos and show you along the way. So.
Okay. And then hot design. What is hot design, and
Yeah,
what do
so
we do with that?
the Uno Platform Studio, and so the Uno Platform Studio is basically made up of 3 components right now. So there's Hot Reload, and I think most people will be familiar. Those people who've been around in the dotnet space would have come through the sort of edit continue type what it used to be called, and then the industry sort of woke up and said, oh well, let's call this thing Hot Reload, and now it's supported in the .NET as a core, but on top of that, we've got a whole bunch of tooling that actually makes it work across all of the platforms we support. And also, there's an indicator that gets launched when you're in debug to show you the sort of the status of the hot reload service when you're making changes to your app, and whether it be XAML or C#. That indicator will light up and basically say, hey, this page has been refreshed, or there was some compilation issues. So it's really useful for developers to make sure that they know that they're looking at the latest version of whatever page they're on. Hot Design is the second of those tools, and this is our entry into the sort of the visual designer space. For people again who have gone through the sort of the WinForms WPF space will be familiar with the sort of the drag and drop type experience, the sort of the static designers that we had at Design Time. And then obviously we had things like Blend and sort of those ones. But those have kind of fallen by the wayside as we've moved into sort of newer technology in terms of WP and WinApp SDK. Mainly because nearly all of those designers kind of suffer from the same problem, is that they can only take you so far, and you get to a certain point where you're trying to maintain the design time data and the experience as much as you are building the app. And so we've taken a slightly different approach with Hot Design, and it's a runtime designer. So you launch your app, you're in your app, and then you switch into designer mode, and you're actually designing and changing your app on the fly. Much as you would with Hot Reload, you're making incremental changes, and those are flowing through to your running app. Now we're doing that with the designer experience that essentially is built, that's packaged into your app. And allows you to change the visual design. It allows you to customize data bindings, those types of things, all from within the running app. And so you're seeing those live changes appear within the app as you go. And now the third part of the Uno Platform Studio is the design to code. And actually, if you're thinking about these sequentially in the sort of the workflow, this actually comes first. So design to code is the Figma plugin that we have that's been around for a while, that's falling under the Uno Platform Studio banner as well. And that allows you designers to, as you'll see in the demo, to take to work in Figma where they're comfortable, and then for developers to be able to export pixel perfect code, either XAML or C# markup, and then drop it into their application and just reduce that friction between the designer world and the developer world. So.
That's cool. I'm excited to see it in more detail. As a Figma user, I'm curious how we get from Figma, into code form, especially the way that's still making sense to all parties.
And it's definitely something that Figma recognized as being a problem, and they're continuing to work. And over the last year or so, we've seen the introduction of various sort of developer-oriented tools and panels and modes being introduced into Figma, and we're seeing that an influx of Figma to XYZ technology kind of plugins, and so. The holy grail is that ability to have that sort of frictionless handoff to the developer space. So.
Cool. Should we take a look?
For sure.
Let's
okay.
go.
So let me just
do this.
I'll jump forward. So one of the things I wanted to just quickly point out is that with the 5.6, just to give you a bit of an overview of just the performance improvements that are coming. So this is our gallery app that's available at gallery.platform.uno. So it's kind of like allows you to walk through the various controls that are available. And one of the interesting pages there is the data grid page, because a lot of our sort of enterprise type customers end up looking for that. And this is a page that's inherently quite slow because it tries to portray a lot of data. So you're seeing on the left-hand side, you're seeing 5.5. It's approximately 5 seconds to render it. And then in 5.6, we're seeing that cut down to just over or just under 2 seconds. So it's a very significant improvement in terms of the rendering performance there. And there's lots more to come as we move into the rest of the year in terms of performance updates. I'll jump forward a couple more slides to this one. This just recaps what I just mentioned about Uno Platform Studio. So in the designer space, we've got design to code. We've then got that sort of round tripping ability within the sort of the developer space between hot reload and hot design. So the two do work in sync with each other. It's very much a collaborative space. And then just highlighting the fact that we're, across all of the different platforms, both in terms of the developer technologies and also the deployment platforms. Okay, so let's jump in and have a look at some of the tooling. So here's hot design. You can see here that the running app is in the center, and obviously we'll see this in a demo in a minute. And we've got the sort of your typical designer kind of tools on the side. So we've got a property grid on the right hand side to allow you to change text, to change margins, those sorts of things. And then on the left, you've got things like your toolbox, where you can drag elements across onto the canvas, and your elements tree, so you sort of document outline on the bottom left. Of course, we'll jump into those in the demo in a minute. One last slide for you all that I just wanted to touch on, and this is what I mentioned about sort of the static designers that we had in the past. So whether it be the WinForms designer or WPF, or other technologies like Fox Pro and Delphi. And then there's been sort of the more recent tooling. So we've got things like some of the sort of the playground style websites where you can go and play around with things like Flutter Dartpad, things like that. And then in the runtime experience, you've got a bunch of things like live preview and live properties built within Visual Studio. So with your WinApp SDK app, you can basically switch to Visual Studio. You can interrogate the property, the document outline view, and then you can actually make changes to some of the properties and see them reflected in the app. But there's no persistence of those. You're not making changes to the XAML. It's just literally just experimenting around with how things change. So we're trying to take the best of all of those worlds into a runtime designer-based experience. And with that, I'll get rid of the slides because nobody really wants to spend more time in slides. And we'll launch into some code. Okay, so before I actually jump into hot design, let me just show you the getting started experience for Uno Platform. So we'll go ahead and create a quick project. So let me just jump through the create new project, and we'll jump through the usual screens. I'm not going to bother changing the name of the app. And so this is the wizard that we have for Uno Platform. And so this allows you to basically customize which version of the framework you want to target. So we've now made the .NET 9 the default, but you can still target .NET 8 if you want. On the left-hand side, we have two presets. We have a blank one, which is literally bare bones. We don't include any other framework other than what you really bare minimum that you need in order to run Uno Platform app across all of the different platforms. The default is actually the recommended template that actually comes with a bunch of things like navigation frameworks and some sort of basic code for things like authentication and those types of things. And then you can go and customize either of those. So if I come down here under platforms, I can take this recommended template. I can say, actually, I don't want to build for iOS. And so now you're customizing that template. Okay. I'm not actually going to hit create on this because it takes a few minutes to actually run the process. I have one here already. And so this was using the recommended template. So you can see here that we've got a single project or single solution project set up here. And this is similar to Maui in the sense that there's a single project that targets all of your different platforms. And similar to Maui, you can switch between the different target platforms using this drop down where you go to run your application. The other things in here is the various folders. So you can see here that we've got a presentation folder that includes your pages and your view models, etc. And so it's all laid out so that you can really start to build out your application and start to build on top of it. So it gives you a good starting point if you want some guidance around that. Of course, the blank template, you don't get any of that. You get a basic page and that's it. You can customize it and bring in the components that you want to use for your application. Okay. So let's give this a bit of a run. I'm actually picking the desktop target. So right now, the WinApp SDK target is not supported for hot design, but for building on desktop, you can go ahead and click on the desktop one, which is a skier renderer, but again, will work on desktop. Okay, so here's our application. I mentioned before the hot reload indicator. That's this little thing widget on the right-hand side. So this overlay here. And this tooling is only here at debug time. It's not there at, it's not built into your application at runtime. There's no extra overhead for having these tools. If you do want to turn them off, you can. But as I said, they're not there in the release build, so there's no impact on your actual build. You know, either the build size or the speed or anything to do with your actually release-based application. Okay, so we've got our running app. I'm actually going to switch back to our main page here, and I'm just going to make a simple change to the text on the button. So I'm going to say go to next page instead of second page. I'm going to hit save, and I'll hit hot reload and come back to our running application. And we'll see that update when it comes through. Applying. Okay, there. So it's updated. You see that there's a notification that appears alongside the indicator. And if I click on the indicator, I'll actually see a history of those events, right? So if you want to make sure that your particular update came through, you can actually.
Can you zoom in on that a little bit, Nick? Is that possible?
Yeah, let me see.
Oh, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, there you go.
You get our
magic of editing on StreamYard.
Yeah. I've forgotten. Okay. All right. So that's hot reload. And then obviously with the icon next to it is hot design. Okay. So if I click on that, we're going to go from our application in sort of a running mode into a design mode. Now your application is still actually running. It's just been moved into the center. And so let me just expand this out. I'll move our toolbar up here, and I'll just tweak this a little bit so we're taking up a little bit more space. So you can see that it's a design-based canvas, so you can do the usual things like sort of zoom in, zoom out. You can, once you're zoomed in, you can of course scroll. Up the top here, you do have the ability to toggle things like light and dark mode, so you can see how your application is going to behave as you toggle between those different modes. I mentioned before, you've got your toolbox on your left-hand side, so I can quite easily grab an item here and drag it across onto the canvas. On the left-hand side, you've got the elements tree, so again, you can click on one of those to focus it. And then on the right-hand side, you've got our property grid. And here you can do basic things like change alignments, those types of things. So I can go ahead and change the text on the page. So go to, let's just say go to next.
So you're doing all of this while this app is running, technically speaking.
Yeah. And what I was going to show you, right, is actually when I make that change there, so it's now saying go to next, you can see that it's updated on the screen. Apologies, it's a little small. But then if I switch back to Visual Studio, you'll actually see that that's been updated in the XAML. And so so the idea is that they do co-play, and so we're making those changes to the XAML so that as you leave that hot design experience, you've modified your app. It's going to persist like that.
Is hot design built on top of hot reload?
Yeah, it is. And so there are some things where, like a lot of it, the updates are done in the running app. So we make local changes to the UI elements. However, there are some things like applying a template and things like that, where we actually need to write them to XAML. It needs to go through the compilation process and use hot reload to then update the running application. So yeah, it is a crucial technology as part of the ability to deliver hot design.
Got it.
So one of the last thing I was going to show in this part of the demo is actually the ability to customize things based on the sort of the size or the resolution of your application. And so here we've got this responsive extensions. So rather than having to manually code changes to the text in my button as my screen size changes, I can go ahead and say when I'm on the narrowest size device, I just want to say next. Oops, let's just do that. When I'm on a sort of a mid-range device, I'm just going to say go to. We'll just say next page. And then on the widest screen, so a big desktop type monitor, I'll say go to next. Okay, so now I've defined these 3 different values, and then I can come to the top of here and I can actually try to see, I can actually test this out using the tooling here. So I can see that as I switch between this form factor, I can see the button says next. As I then jump up, it changes to next page, and then I jump up again, and it says go to next page. So that gives me the ability to control or to customize my application as the app's sizes, all done from within Hot Design.
Cool.
Neat.
So yeah,
this is so cool. I like it's so nice to be able to basically have this space to make it easy to like create all these front-facing designs and stuff while the app is running in real time. Like it's like hot reload to the max, kind of.
Yeah, look, it is totally. And when we got it to work in the first place, it was like, wow, okay, there's no end of stuff that we can now do.
No,
with this.
exactly.
It's pretty exciting technology.
Can you go back and show? Can you go back and show the XAML that generated? Because in the old days we used Visual State and Visual State Manager, but it now seems like you just have responsive. Is that right?
Yeah, so we've actually got a couple of things, and actually behind the scenes, some of these do actually use visual states, and you can still use visual states. We haven't actually got support within Hot Design for visual states right now, but it is in the roadmap. The reason being is that one of the main uses for visual states is this responsive sort of design, or responsive handling, and we built into the toolkit for Vimeo platform, we do have 2 different ways of doing this. So the one I just showed you is a thing called responsive extensions. So this basically allows you to customize an individual property. So for example, here we're customizing the content property on the button. And essentially we're defining what those property values are going to be for those different breakpoints. And obviously those breakpoints are predefined, but you can override them if you want. And then we have a responsive control, which basically allows you to do whole segments of the UI for those different layouts. And again, that covers a significant portion of where visual states would have taken off. And again, it's not to say that you can't use visual states. Yeah.
Way less code, way easier. I love it.
Yeah.
And we often found that one of the downsides of visual states were that they were very verbose. And, if you just wanted to do things like we've just seen in terms of, just one thing, I wanted to vary between those different form factors, it was a little bit OTT over the top. So, yeah.
So I guess I have a question regarding like more about what it can and can't do, or at least currently. So when it comes to adding logic, like let's say you created the button, but then you want it to like click over to the next page, like assuming it's hot reload supported, in theory, can you then go back into VS, add that logic on top of whatever gets added? And
of course. Yeah. Cool. So the limitations in terms of what we can do are kind of mapped to what the limitations of hot reload are. And so if you're going to do things like change package references and things like that, that's a scenario where you have to stop, rebuild the app and relaunch it. And there are still some areas where hot reload has what we call root edits. So basically edits that will break the running app, or at least break the hot reload experience. It won't break necessarily the running app, and those will force a restart. So Hot Design still has those, and we're working to make sure that we try and reduce the number or the positioning of those in terms of what we can do in terms of the XAML to C# compiling. But yeah, there's definitely still some scenarios in terms of the way that you code your app where you could run into those as well. But yeah, no, you can absolutely go and add pages, you can add controls, those types of things without having to recompile or restart your application, and those will automatically flow through to into the Hot Design experience. So
I like it.
Cool. So I've got one other demo that
Let me just interrupt for 1 second. Getting back to the echo, are people listening hearing the echo on a regular basis? I've heard it intermittently a couple times, but I just want to see if people listening are hearing it often. So, and I wonder if it's me.
Makes me think it's me because I can't hear it.
You can't hear it. All right. Okay. I'll mute myself when I'm not talking and see if it goes away.
Me too. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Okay, Nick, proceed.
Yeah, that's awesome. So right now we've just seen a very sort of basic application. It's hello world style. And so what I kind of wanted to show you was a slightly more sophisticated app. So we have a concept app called Chefs. Let me see if I can just bring up the design. Where's it gone? There. So it's a full sort of recipe orientated app. We do have the sample code. It will be published shortly. And I just kind of wanted to walk you through building up a slightly more complex page that's part of that experience. And so we're not building something from scratch. It's an existing app that we're actually going to go in and essentially implement a page in. So this is the recipe details page that's currently a blank page. Let me show you the example. So it's basically just a page. It's got a bunch of includes at the top, but essentially it's just a blank grid at the moment. So let me go ahead and run this. Okay, so here's our app. Now, one thing I actually forgot to show you, and I'm glad I launched on this page, is that this page is one that one of the developers forgot to style properly. So I actually just want to fix this while we're here. You can see these buttons here, the next and previous buttons. They're not styled properly, and so when our designers put a lot of effort into actually making sure that we have a set of design standards and stuff and built-in styles, they haven't been applied here. So let me just go in and change that. You see at the top of our property grid, we've tried to elevate the use of styles and try to encourage developers to pick on the styles rather than necessarily going and customizing the properties of an element. So pick styles first and modify the properties. So I can go ahead and say, this is going to be my chef's primary button. And so that style is then going to be applied directly onto there. And to answer the question that nearly always comes up is, no, we don't currently have a style editor within Hot Design, but it is definitely on the roadmap. Because we recognize that at least one of those common scenarios is, people will customize a button and then they'll want to extract that as a style and into the running code. So that's definitely on the roadmap for us to have that level of support. Now, I'm currently in the sort of the Hot Design experience. Let me just increase the size there. And now, rather than jumping out to get to the page that I want to, we've got this ability to switch from sort of selection mode, so where I can select on an element, to interaction mode. And so you'll see when I click on that, the tool windows sort of dim out. If I actually click on those, it'll go back into selection mode. But now I can actually interact with my app. So I can skip, here, I can go through to the app, and then I can go to the recipe details page, which is the page that I want to be hot designing. And now when I'm here, I can go back into selection mode and I can start to go ahead and design this page. And so the idea there is it becomes a little bit less, jumping in and jumping out of Hot Design with that ability to actually interact with the app. And that's particularly useful when you're doing things like you might be customizing how a flip view works. So you don't particularly want to have to jump out of Hot Design and re-rotate the window just so that you can step between the various pages in the flip view, for example. Okay, so this is our page that we're going to be customizing. And just to remind people, the layout that we're looking for looks a little bit like this. So we have this navigation bar at the top, hero image on the left, and a list of ingredients on the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and do that. We've got our grid here. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually split it up into the sort of the 3 but 4 quadrants that we actually need. So there's going to be 2 different columns, because the image on the left, ingredients on the right hand side. So for that, I'm going to use the simplified format of that. So I can basically just type in star, column, star into the column definition there. And you'll see that in the middle, there's a column definition line that appears to give you that visual cue as the fact that you've got these 2 columns. I'm going to do the same for rows. This time I'm going to use the more complex editor, which allows me to go in and customize this a little bit more and gives me fine-grained control over the ability to set minimum and maximum sizes. Here, we're just going to set this first row to auto. But if I wanted to set like the pixel sizes of a particular column, I can do that as well. Now, notice that when I do set that to auto, the row definition or the row indicator has disappeared because there's nothing in that first row, so it auto sizes to 0. So the indicator is there, but it's kind of masked by this blue line at the top. let me go and find our navigation bar. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to drag that onto our elements list here. Of course, it defaults to the standard place for that XAML element. So we're not, when you drag an element on, we're not trying to predict and try to insert certain margins or columns and weirdness that Blend used to do. We'll basically drop it in there, and it will take up the amount of space that that XAML element, if you just put the raw element, would take up. So in this case, the navigation bar is in the first row and first column. Now we actually want it to span the width, so I'll come over here and I'll find the color span, and I can set that to 2, and you'll see that it immediately spans to fill the width. Now, if you remember from the designs, it actually had the title of the recipe in the navigation bar. So we can come here and we go to our content. If I expand this out, you'll actually see under binding, we can actually go and customize this to actually drill down into the current data context of the current page. And so this has already been set up in our code. And so I can drill into here, find the recipe, and set the recipe name to be the data binding expression. And you'll see that it immediately populates. What I didn't show you there, and I'll show you in a second when we bind something else, is that it was actually showing you the current values of all of those properties as well. Don't worry, we're going to do data binding a few more times, so I'll show you that. Let me grab my image. I'm going to drag that onto here. You notice as I drag it into the lower quadrant, it is actually picking up the fact that I'm intentionally putting it in that second row. So it's going to drop it in there, and it's automatically set to the appropriate row and column. And while I'm doing that, let me also grab my list view and drop that into the right-hand side, like so. So I mentioned that we'll be doing a little bit more data binding. So let me set the source for the image here. So again, we'll drill into the recipe, and so you can see here that the various properties of our recipe or the current recipe are shown here. And I can click on the image, and it will populate that like so. Let's just change some of these properties to have it to expand to fill and make sure it centers horizontally. Okay, so that's our image done. Our list view is a little bit more complicated because first of all, we need to set an item source. So I can come in here and again, data binding. So we'll come down here and we'll specify our ingredients list. But of course, right now, all it's doing is it's taking our ingredient object and actually just serializing it. So it's a 2-string. It's not a wonderful designer-oriented experience. But what I can do is I can go and customize the item template here. And so now we're sort of leaving the designer for the page and going into a template editing experience. And here I can go ahead and I've got roughly the same experience. So I can click on my grid. I can specify that I want 2 columns. Here, I'm going to change this from being a star to 50 pixels. And we'll see that column divider appears like so. Let me grab an image and drop that into there. And the text block. We'll just drop that into the right-hand side. We'll go ahead and data bind this up. And so the binding experience here when we're in the data template editor is actually derived based on the item or the first item in the list. So we recognize that actually having a data context is particularly useful when you're trying to do data binding. And if you're in a list of items, we'll show you, we'll pass in the data context of being the first item in the list. If you're doing other templates, then we'll try and pick the appropriate data context for that as well. So here we're going to pick the image for that. And again, it's blurring a little bit. So let me just tell that to not size. And we'll just make sure that centers vertically and horizontally. For the text block here, we're going to, again, data bind that. Drill down here and we'll specify the name. And then we'll just bump up the size and make sure, again, that it's actually centered vertically there. Okay, so now we can come back out of our template editing mode. And what I might just quickly do is jump back to Visual Studio and show you what this looks like in terms of the code that's been generated. And so what you'll see here is that the code is basically, it's got the properties defined here that I as a developer have gone about and set, with the only additional ones being that the injection of row, column, and row. As I dropped the element in there, we were clever enough to pick up the fact that you were dropping into a certain quadrant, so we were able to put the row and columns for you there. But all of the rest of these are all the properties that I've defined as a developer. So I hit save on that. I hit hot reload and I'll come back to the application, and that will repopulate there. For those who had a keen eye, you will notice that there is a slight bug in the version that I've got where it was not repopulating the list view. So I did need to trigger a hot reload experience for that.
Okay, I have a number of questions.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely keen to stop there.
Cool so I'm not seeing a lot of comments. Leslie, are people posting comments? If anybody has comments or questions, please feel free to chime in. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe they're just all in shock and awe about how cool this is.
Okay. So question. So you're doing all this design at runtime, right?
Yeah.
So the obvious question is, how far, what would it take to make this happen at design time? Is
so
that
the question,
something we could potentially expect?
So we have thought about what that design time experience would be, because essentially the way that we would do that is that we would have your app running, but we would then inject the sort of the canvas and the tooling back into Visual Studio, because we recognize that, I mean, part of the intent here is to give you your running app experience, and so that you have the data that's available in your app, you have the actual running capability of your app. We're not trying to sort of mock up or try to predict what the rendering is going to be, because the platform is actually rendering your code. And so whilst we do recognize that there is a desire to have a designer time experience, we're prioritizing the sort of the runtime experience for now.
Because I could see, I'm going to create a brand new app. I file new project. I create all of the code, all of the view models and the data service and all the rest of that. And then I create 20 blank pages, and then I run the app, and then I go into each individual page and design them using this tool while the app's running, right? Is that
So the goal here is to simplify that process. So, I mean, ideally, yes, of course, you're going to have to create your view models and your services and all of that type of code. But eventually, I mean, and you know, I wouldn't say that you need to upfront create any of those pages, because you know the app, you could launch your app with a single page, and then as you need to add pages, you go back to Visual Studio, go add page. You don't need to relaunch your app or restart your app, but that page then becomes available for you to then, you know, wire up the event handler for a button to then navigate to that page.
Yeah.
And so there isn't this need to actually drop out of the running app just so that you can do those other activities, if that makes sense. And so, you know, rather than, and I think that this is the direction where a lot of this is going, is that, you know, the idea is that essentially you could just file a new project, launch your app, and then never have to stop it.
Right.
And so all of those activities that you just described, you do while your app's running, and that would be the goal. So,
okay.
And
now so given that the app's running, I assume there's no big performance issue with designing it at the same time, designing the UI.
Not really. There's in terms of overhead, we're not injecting, you know, additional controls or anything like that inside your app. So it's like there's nothing that gets added in terms of the rendering layer of your app. The only thing that we do add when you're in design time is that we do actually wrap essentially a container around it, so that we can do that sort of, you know, the canvas style effect.
Right.
But that won't get in the way of the rendering of your app as such. So
that's cool. It's amazing. It's the designer. It's a very, very excellent designer. And you use at runtime.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I guess my follow-up question to all this, and maybe it's slightly been touched on, but from an organizing preference standpoint, are there ways to customize how all of this gets represented in like the XML and stuff. Like if you wanted to make sure that certain code is going to its own separate new file, like are you able to do that? Or
so we don't necessarily have support for sort of the code styling side of things. So we recognize that there are existing stylers out there. So for XAML, there's already XAML styler that you can go and customize and create rules and things like that. We do try to respect the style of your XAML. So like if your XAML is all like 4 spaces or a tab, then we'll try and make sure that we align to that. It is one of the things that we've thought about a lot, and haven't, we've got a basic solution in there right now, but we'll continue to evolve that. So down the line, if you're using XAML styler, in theory, we could then run XAML styler every time we make code edits and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Because I was thinking about scenarios like if somebody had an editor config file open or something in VS, like is
exactly.
It going to listen to those rules? Yeah.
So
cool.
Now, just to one thing you were interested in, Leslie, is that I just quickly want to show you the Figma plugin and the ability to export the code from Figma. So this is this is Figma. So this is basically the same page that we were just on. I've just switched to a different tab on here. And so what we have here is the Uno platform plugin. So this is a part designer, part developer tool, in the sense that the designer can basically take their design, launch the plugin, hit this refresh button, and it's going to show you what that page is going to look like when it's running in an Uno app. So this is actually a live representation of the application. I can basically click on the elements here. They're actually, I wouldn't say live because they're not actually backed on any, like they're not going to navigate through the application or anything like that. But they're live in the sense that they are the real controls. Okay, so it's basically extracted the design, and it's rendering those as they would be rendered within the application. And you can see here that we've got this sort of placeholder in here, and this maps to a third-party control that's actually this chart here. And so when we switch to the XAML mode where we can actually see the XAML, let me just move this so you can see it a little bit clearer. You can see that third-party control will be rendered in the XAML. So one thing I can do here is basically grab this XAML like this, and now we can switch back to our application. I'm going to go back into running to the XAML for our application, and I'm going to just paste this over here like so. Let's make sure I copied that in correctly, like so. And then I'm going to hit hot reload and then return to our application. And you can see here now that it's updated with the and it's showing us our tab bar. It's updated the various elements here. And the one thing it's missing is our user control. Okay, so it's put a placeholder there. It's got a custom user control. But the third-party control component that is the chart, I do actually need to copy in. And I'll grab the Cartesian chart here and drop it in here. And with this selected, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to populate the series. Again, data binding this. And I'm going to select the series property there. And you can see it dynamically populates with the running data. Okay, so I've taken essentially XAML that's been generated from Figma, dropped it into our running application that's used hot reload to repopulate the application. I've wired up a third-party control that's, it's through a package that I've referenced. So in this case, it's live charts. Drop that in, data bound it up, and we've now got a chart displayed on the screen. So there's some very cool stuff we can do with this technology, and we're really just touching the beginning of it at the moment. So.
That is so cool.
I love it. I love the Figma attachment to it all as well. That is very exciting stuff. I mean, as somebody who likes to design pretty sites and stuff when I write my own personal apps and stuff, but doesn't actually like to implement them, especially because of the calls that you're demonstrating can be alleviated. Yeah, that's a really cool tool that I think saves a lot of time. I feel like the productivity spikes up knowing you don't have to constantly stop and start when you're just trying to experiment with like a button size and things like that, and being able to do it in like a hub that makes it very accessible and easy to experiment, and
Yeah,
not
look,
necessarily.
and that's part of one of the sort of the mantras behind Uno is that we're trying to alleviate or make it easier and quicker for people to build high quality applications. So any time we're experiencing a frustration point, whether it be hot reload, the design experience, packaging, all those types of things, those are the sort of the things that we're trying to round out, make it easier for developers to build the apps that are going to work for them. So I just want to draw attention to this slide, which basically just so for more information on Platform Uno, go to the website. You can join the waitlist for the hot design tool. It hasn't gone public quite yet, but if you join the waitlist now, we've got people standing by to basically add you to the pre-beta. And then, of course, if you want to ask questions, the Discord server is there as well. It's a great engagement tool there. So, yeah.
So one of the things that comes to mind about the hot design is it would seem like a great way to cut down the learning curve on the actual XAML. So as we've discussed before, Uno is based on the Win API variant of XAML. And if you might be coming from one of the other variants or not as well versed in Win UI. So if you just basically use the hot designer to lay out the page and it writes the XAML for you, that's a great way, I would think, to accelerate your actual learning of the XAML that you need to be using, right? Is that
look,
you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. And we recognize that, particularly for people coming from non-XAML based technologies, right? So
Sure.
yes, there's some similar, there's some differences between MAUI and WPF to the WinApp SDK breed of XAML. But most of the time, developers who are versed in those can quite easily jump between the different flavors of XAML. You just need to remember which syntax hat to wear. But yeah, people coming from other technologies, so whether it be native development for iOS or Android or Flutter or one of those other technologies, they all have different UI controls that render things in a different way. And having the ability to have the toolbox there, drag an element on, and then just see how it behaves as you modify properties is definitely important.
Yeah.
So right now, the properties grid is very much a uniform list of the properties. We do, I didn't draw attention to it, but we do switch between smart properties and all properties. So the idea behind smart ones is for those common controls that everyone's going to use. We've tried to promote the most common or the most frequently used properties, because most controls have like hundreds of properties that people never use. There is a search box that you would have seen me use as well to allow you to find the properties. But going forward, we're one of the things that we've got in our back of our mind is how do we improve that experience even further? So how can we group things like height and width into essentially a single size-based property that makes sense for developers? So if you come from the Figma world, you recognize that they do a similar concept where they group like properties to give you a more cohesive experience. So that'll be the goal there in terms of the future of that property grid, is to try and make it easier for developers to find the properties they're after. But more importantly, to your point, Robert, about the learning experience, it makes it, if we do that type of thing, it makes it easier to learn the behavior of various controls and how they interact with each other.
Yeah, and just to, I mean, as you said, if you know one XAML, you can learn the others, and we've all, I think a lot of us have done that. But to design a page and then go look at the XAML and see that you're already familiar with 70, 80, 90% of it. And then you can just kind of look and see, oh, okay, that's a little different than I expected. That's a little different than I expected. Okay, I can start doing that in the future. Just really cuts the plumbing learning curve, I would think, dramatically. So you can focus on the actual app, the cooler stuff, learning more advanced stuff. as opposed to having to learn, oh, are buttons called buttons? You know, does the grid work exactly the same way? What are the minor differences that you can learn kind of after the fact? You design it, you lay it out, and then you go and look at the XAML, as opposed to having to know it up front.
And then on top of that,
and that becomes very. Sorry, Lizzie, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say that one of the areas that I feel that Blend, I did a good job in its own right, but it was very hard for sort of designers to get their head around, was the item templates, and particularly where you then end up going down multiple levels of item templates. So for example, you might have a list that has an item template, and inside that you might have, say, a button, and the button has a template, and so that ability to drill down multiple layers, it conceptually is quite difficult, and Blend did an okay job of it. We have the same sort of scenario that we're trying to deal with, and so again, our model is you start from the page, you click on the element that you want to do the item template, you drill into that item template, then you can drill into again and again and again, and so you get this sort of breadcrumb effect at the top, where you can then step back through those. And the idea is that as you're making changes, as you step back up, you'll then be able to see those applied changes to each level of the design-based experience. So
right, awesome. So there's a wait list, there's a beta. What can you share in terms of timing?
Yeah, so the waitlist is active now. So basically, if you join the waitlist, we're pretty much giving everyone access straight away who joins the waitlist. The beta is shortly. So okay. I'm not going to put a hard date on it, but it is, it's less than multiple weeks away. So
okay,
I don't know. It's very close. We've just published 5.6. The version of Hot Design that will come out will be based on the 5.6 code base. So
I'm one of those people who yeah, I'm definitely one of those people where I'll stick my name on a wait list for something, completely forget about it for weeks and weeks, and then it's like Christmas when I go like, guess what? It's time. Like, oh yeah, I forgot I signed up for that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, look, we've got the wait list there because we wanted to get some early feedback in terms of the way people, to make sure that people were able to get the technology to work. Because we recognize that it was conditional on hot reload working properly, and so we've done a lot of refinement there to make sure that technology is more stable, and so now as we go into the beta phase, that the whole design experience will be much more stable for people. So yeah,
cool. So I just signed up for it.
Nice. Excellent.
Right on. Cool. What else in the next couple of minutes do you want us to know?
That's a very good question. Let me just pull back. So I did jump over it at the beginning quite a lot, or quite a bit, in terms of the Uno platform, sort of very, very baseline. So the core platform, obviously, it is open source. Will continue to be maintained as an open source platform, and that's your core nuts and bolts for getting, for building for any of the core platforms. Above that, we do have a number of other sort of code bases that are there to support developers. So we have theme libraries, so you can switch between Fluent and Material. And again, that's supported in Hot Design. So if you pick the Material library, it's going to be supported, so you're going to have those built-in styles all the way through that Hot Design experience. And the reason we can do that is because we're not doing anything fancy. We're just taking advantage of the XAML that's already part, and the references that are already part of your application. So if you're referencing the Material library, there are already built-in styles and themes that are available in there that we will just display for you within the Hot Design experience. Right? So we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. We're not injecting anything fancy into your application. We have the extensions library. So as part of that wizard experience, there was a number of extensions that you can opt into. And these cover things like whether you want to use MVVM or MVUX. So MVUX is our more sort of reactive style pattern to doing state management. We've got modules for authentication, configuration, and just to add that these extensions, a lot of them are based on the Microsoft extensions. So you would have seen things like, obviously, Microsoft's got ones for logging and hosting and dependency injection. So we're just building on top of those, right? So we're just making sure that the Microsoft extensions work for all of the mobile, like all of the platforms that are supported for Uno. But then we have our own ones that are customized for things like navigation, for storage, for serialization. Those types of things are built on top of that to make it an easier developer experience.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got the toolkit. So WinUI and WinApp SDK very geared towards a desktop experience, missing kind of controls you would expect on, say, a mobile or phone-based application. So things like a navigation bar, things like safe area control to allow, room for the notch and things like that. Those are all available in the toolkit to make it easier for developers to build apps that are going to work across all different platforms and technologies.
Cool.
Then we've got third-party controls. So we've got a bunch of vendors that are supporting there. The community toolkit, so the Windows community toolkit. Now a lot of their controls are supported across the Uno platform. So as part of that hot design experience, you would have seen the grid, the splitter bars that I was dragging in and out to control the width of the tool windows. That comes from the community toolkit. So we're actually using part of that in the hot design experience. And then the tooling that sits behind it. So there's a bunch of tools there that are designed to just make sure that the developer experience is more cohesive, right? So we've got Uno check that's make sure that you have all of the basics installed. Obviously, the project wizard that we saw in terms of creating your application and picking the options that you want. We have things for doing image resizing and packaging, and then we've got some templates for CI pipelines as well. So, there's a whole gambit of things that are available for developers that want to build for the platform. So.
This has been great. I also just signed up for the wait list.
Any questions from the viewers?
Nope, just stuff like we're amazed and hot design. The hot design way is next evolution with hot reload.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, hopefully go fill out the wait list, people. But that said, if people have questions later down the line, since we're 1 minute before end time, and
let me put that back up. So you can either post on the repository, so github.com/Uno platform/Uno, or you can jump on the Discord and ask questions there. We've got a fairly active community that either the community or members of the team will jump in and answer questions. For sure.
Sweet.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, Nick, thanks for being on the show once again.
It's awesome always to be. Yeah.
Probably not the last time. So looking forward to seeing how Uno continues to evolve going forward and stuff, because clearly it's been changing a lot, which is very exciting to see.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks very much for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks to everyone in the chat. Once again, go fill out the wait list, go try out Uno, share your feedback. And also, if you want to follow any of us, you know where to find us. And until next time, happy coding, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.